In our last video, we built a luggage trunk from the ground up. Today, we're taking it to the next level, covering it inside and out with vinyl for that classic road-ready look. We'll show you everything from choosing the right vinyl to sticking it down, wrapping the corners, and getting a clean, vintage finish. So, grab your tools, roll up your sleeves, and let's get to work. Now, before you start cutting and gluing, let's talk about vinyl, because not all vinyl is created equal, especially when it's going on a trunk, riding outside, exposed to the weather on the back of your car. You want a vinyl that's tough and durable, but also flexible enough to wrap around the corners and edges without cracking. Look for a marine-grade vinyl. It's designed to handle the elements. Make sure it's UV resistant so it won't fade or crack under the sun. And weather resistance is key. A waterproof backing helps prevent moisture from soaking into the wood underneath. If you're like us, you'll also want something with a bit of a texture or grain to it, something that looks period correct but holds up to modern use. Pick out the right vinyl and you'll not only get that authentic look, but a trunk that'll last for the long haul. Once we picked out our vinyl, we sketched out a plan to figure out how much we'd need. Then, we picked it up, brought it home, and got ready to start cutting. Before you grab your scissors, it pays to take a few minutes and plan out your cuts. Vinyl isn't cheap, and you want to make sure that you're getting the most out of your roll without wasting material. Start by measuring each panel of your trunk, the top, the bottom, the front, back, and both sides. Write these measurements down and add at least an inch or two extra on all sides. That extra material gives you room to wrap around the edges and trim the excess cleanly away later. It helps to make a quick sketch of your trunk and plan where each piece will come from on the vinyl. Lay out the patterns so that you can minimize the seams and get a nice clean look, especially on the large visible surfaces like the top or the front. When you're ready, unroll the vinyl onto a large clean surface, smooth side down. Use a straight edge and mark your cut lines. Avoid things like ballpoint pens or anything that could leave a permanent mark or damage the material. And here's another tip. Use sharp fabric scissors for clean edges. Dull scissors will leave ragged cuts that are harder to work with, especially when wrapping the corners. Take your time at this stage. A little planning here will make the wrapping and gluing go so much smoother later on. With all our vinyl pieces cut, it was time to start on the inside of the trunk. Pat grabbed a sheet of 1/4-inch plywood and cut panels to line the inside. 4 for the walls, 1 for the floor, and 2 that we would combine for the lid. The front wall panel measures 32 3/8 inches long by 12.5 inches tall, while the back one is the same length but 15 inches tall. The side panels are 9 7/8 inches long, and they taper from 15 inches tall in the back to 12.5 inches up front. Remember, we cut the vinyl pieces for these panels about 2 inches longer on all 4 sides than the wooden panels themselves, to give us that extra room that we need to wrap them around the edges and attach them on the back. Underneath the lid, we cut a 32 1/4 inch long by 8 5/8 inch wide section of paneling for the large section of the lid, and a smaller 32 1/4 inch long by 3 3/8 inches wide section of paneling for the curved part. We will wrap one large piece of vinyl around both of these pieces together so that it will bend to follow the contours of the top. In order for the vinyl to adhere to the wood, we use 3M's Maximum Strength Clear Contact Adhesive 90. In order for it to work, you need to spray it on the back of the vinyl and let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes, or until it starts to get tacky. Then, you line up and lay down your piece of interior paneling, in this case, a side piece, and press the surfaces firmly together. The spray can serve as a roller to remove any air pockets or wrinkles.
Roll it out like dough, like Grandma would. making cookies.
These are special cookies.
Special cookies. Couple rolls. Sticks her down real nice. Can works great as a roller.
Maybe right about there.
Once the vinyl is stuck down, it's time to wrap the edges. Pull the vinyl tight, fold it over the sides, and staple it to the back of the panel. This process is pretty much the same for all of our pieces, so we'll show you how we did it on the floor insert of the trunk. To secure the vinyl on the back, we used 1/4-inch stainless steel staples. These short staples, combined with the contact cement on the front, give a strong, long-lasting hold. Since all the stapling is done on the back side, it stays completely hidden once the panel is in place, giving everything a clean, finished look.
Attaboy.
Corners can be a little tricky. It's a lot like wrapping a present. Some folding, some tucking, and a few careful cuts. The straight edges are easier. Just pull the vinyl tight and staple a clean line down each side. Take your time, fold, cut, staple, and before you know it, all 4 sides are wrapped and ready to go. The last step for the floor panel is adding a small pull strap. This makes it easier to lift the panel out of the bottom of the trunk when needed. Since we're planning to bolt our trunk to the luggage rack, having this strap will help give us quick access to those mounting bolts whenever we need to attach or remove the trunk. Once each panel is wrapped in our green vinyl, we'll slide them into place inside the trunk, finishing off the interior with a sharp, custom look. With the interior wrapped up and ready to go, it was time to get to work on the outside of the luggage trunk. To prepare the vinyl to go on the outside of our box, we applied some more of our contact cement to both the backside of our black vinyl and the exterior backside and bottom of our wooden luggage box. Just like before, we let it sit about 5 to 10 minutes until it started to get tacky to the touch. Then, George and Pat picked up the luggage box, brought it over to our work table, lined up the bottom with our pre-drawn guidelines, and carefully laid it down onto the vinyl. With the bottom lightly attached, we slid the box up to the front of our workspace and carefully tipped it back and sat it on its face. Next, Al and Pat began working the vinyl down around the back of the trunk. Starting at the bottom edge, they pressed the vinyl firmly into place, making sure it was glued tight. Once the corner was set, Al started in the center and slowly worked his way outward and up the back of the box. Moving carefully and methodically, he smoothed the vinyl as he went, pressing out any air bubbles or wrinkles along the way. To follow up, we grabbed a few cans of contact cement and used them like rolling pins, going over both the back and the bottom to ensure everything was pressed down evenly and stuck in place for good. With the back and bottom glued, we set the box upright and began to work on the upper back corner. Using an X-Acto knife, George began cutting the back corners to fit the upper back edge of the trunk. Next, Pat sprayed a layer of contact cement onto the leftover strip of vinyl to get it ready to stick. As we waited for the vinyl to get tacky, George and Al worked to trim away the excess vinyl on the right and left sides of the box. Beginning first on the left side, George began removing the protruding vinyl from the vertical backside of the box. It may be necessary to cut and recut the vinyl to get as close to the wooden edge as possible. In some cases, a different angle might also help achieve the cleanest cut.
There. Now, we'll slide it off the end. Either way, it'll trail one way or another.
Next, we moved on to the right side. Cutting the same way as before, George cut away the unnecessary vinyl along the back edge, flush along with the wooden back edge of the box. And Al finished it up by cutting the excess off the bottom. Once the sides were trimmed up and our contact cement had gotten tacky, it was time to address the top back of the box. Carefully pressing the interior section of the vinyl down onto the wood and then wrapping it over the top and inside of the box, we cemented it to the trunk. And just like before, we used our spray can to help push out any air bubbles or wrinkles underneath the vinyl. To finish off the top section of this piece of vinyl, George made some careful tucks and folds and a few careful cuts, and before we knew it, both top corners were done. And to wrap up this piece of vinyl entirely, we trimmed off any and all of the excess vinyl sticking out of the bottom, back, and inside of the box. To give the inside vinyl a little support, we ran a few stainless steel staples along the bottom of the upper back interior piece of framing. Then we trimmed up the vinyl on that piece as well. Next up was our side, front, and other side sheet of vinyl. Just like before, Pat got us started by spraying contact cement onto the backside of the vinyl. Then George brought it over to our work table and laid it out. With the vinyl ready to go, we sprayed contact cement onto the front and two sides of the luggage box, along with the front inside piece of framing, and waited a few minutes for all of our pieces to get tacky. Then, just like before, George and Pat brought the box back over to our work table, lined it up with our mark, and sat it down onto the vinyl. After firmly pressing the box down onto the vinyl, we lifted and flipped the box over onto its back so that we'd have good access to the front and both sides. Beginning with the front, George used our spray can to press the vinyl down against the wooden box, pushing out any wrinkles or air bubbles. Then we slid the box over and carefully pressed the vinyl down on the right side. Moving carefully from the corner downward, George secured the vinyl to the box as Pat held the corners tightly to prevent wrinkling. Then, just like before, George used our spray can to more firmly press the vinyl down into place. With the right side done, we pushed the trunk back the other way and began to repeat the process on the left side of the box. Just like with the interior panels, outside corners can be a little tricky as well. But with some careful folding, tucking, and cutting, you can get the vinyl to lay down the way you want it to. With the corners ready, we used our staple gun to lock down the bottom corner and bottom side of the box.
Pull that over, and then I should staple it.
Then, to secure the bottom of the front side of the vinyl, we ran a line of staples across the front edge of the box from right to left. With the front stapled down, we repeated the process with the other corner, securing it first with stainless steel staples. Then, locking down the bottom of the left side by running a line of staples there as well. With the bottom secured and stapled, we moved to the front top of the box. Just like with the back, George used an X-Acto knife to cut the front corners to fit the front edge of the box. With both corners cut, we pressed the inside strip of vinyl down onto the front intersection of the framing. Then Pat further secured it with a few stainless steel staples. Next up came the upper corners of the box. Beginning first with the top, front corner, George cut a small line through the first layer of vinyl, parallel with the front of the box. Then, cutting through only the top layer of vinyl, he cut a line down from the previous cut through to the corner of the box, cutting out what looks like a small rectangle from the corner. This allows the vinyl to more easily lay down across the top of the box when folded over. Then, using a straight edge to help guide his next cut, George cut a diagonal line through from the corner of the box out to the inner edge of the front face of the box. With the lower corner cut, we moved up the side to the upper left corner. Once again, being careful to cut only through one layer of our vinyl, George used his straight edge to cut another diagonal from the inside corner of the box to the outside of the same corner. Then, to help the vinyl lay down, George cut a line perpendicular to the back of the trunk beginning at the back of his diagonal cut through to the back of that piece of vinyl.
Yeah, now let's fold her down and staple it, and then I cut the corners.
Then, using our staple gun, we pulled the vinyl tight and attached the excess to the inside of the luggage box. Because we're going to cover this vinyl with our interior green vinyl insert, we won't need to get fancy about cleaning up this line. Back to the rear left corner, George used our straight edge to trim off the excess material from the corner. Once the back corner was trimmed up, he moved down to the front left corner and did the same. Then, to lock everything down, he used a staple gun to attach the vinyl along the left side and down the back of the trunk.
Flip it up.
Then, we flipped the trunk over and attached the vinyl on the bottom of the trunk in the same manner, running a line of staples along the entire bottom left side of the box. To clean it up a bit, George used our X-Acto knife to trim away the excess material from both the back and the bottom of the box. Once stapled, we finished up this side of the box by folding, stapling, and trimming the excess corner material away. Because we already had the box positioned on its face, we moved on to the right side of the box and repeated the same process before stapling the back side and bottom vinyl to the trunk. Then, just as before, we cut away the excess material from the right side back and bottom, and to secure the back bottom edge, George made some careful tucks and folds and a few careful cuts, and before we knew it, we had the bottom corner stapled and done. With the bottom and back vinyl completed, we were down to just the upper right-hand side corners to complete the lower half of the box. Beginning first with the top front-facing corner, Al cut a small line through the first layer of vinyl, parallel with the front of the box. Then George, cutting through only the top layer of vinyl, cut a line down from the previous cut through to the corner of the box to cut that small, rectangular-ish shape out of the corner. Then he cut a diagonal line from the corner of the box out to the inner edge of the front face of the box. With the lower corner cut, we moved up the side to the upper right corner. Once again, being careful to cut through only one layer of our vinyl, George cut another diagonal from the outside corner of the box to the inside of the same corner. Then, to help the vinyl lay flat, he stapled it down to the back of the box. Using our staple gun, we pulled the vinyl tight and attached the excess to the inside of the luggage box with stainless steel staples. Back to the rear left corner, George trimmed off the excess material. Once the back corner was trimmed up, he moved down to the front right corner and did the same thing there. Then, to lock everything down, Pat used the staple gun to attach the vinyl along the right side of the trunk. We'll eventually be sealing the top of this lower section of our trunk up with weather stripping. But just to give it a little extra waterproofing, we put a couple of drops of Gorilla Glue underneath our vinyl corner seams to keep any unwanted moisture out. And with that, the trunk bottom was done. At long last, we made it to the final section of the box, the trunk lid. Pat kicked things off just as we'd done twice before, by spraying contact cement onto the top and face of the lid. Then, he walked over to our next sheet of black vinyl and coated that as well. After giving both pieces time to set up and get tacky, George laid the vinyl out on our work table. And Pat brought over the trunk lid, lined it up with our mark, and pressed it down onto the vinyl. Then, we carefully rolled the trunk lid upward from the back side to attach the face of the trunk lid to the piece of vinyl. Once it was attached, we began working on the front face of the trunk top. Using our X-Acto knife, George began cutting the vinyl inside the right and left corners. With the center section of vinyl freed up, we pressed it down into the trunk lid and out of the way. Next, George began cutting the two corners at the front of the trunk lid. First, starting with the right side corner, George cut a line parallel to the front of the trunk lid, where the back of the plywood meets the side. After that, he cut the vinyl along the side of the trunk lid, down along the face of the lid, to the table. Then, we slid the top over the other way, just off the side of the table, and repeated the process on the left side corner. First cutting a line parallel, starting at the side of the trunk, across to where the side meets the front face. Then, cutting the vinyl down along the side of the trunk lid until it met the table. front started, we moved to the back to trim that up as well. Setting the lid up on its face, we pulled the vinyl tight over the back of the lid and pressed it down firmly into the plywood. Then, we repeated what we'd done with the front of the lid on both sides of the trunk back of the lid. First cutting a line from the edge of the vinyl along the inside of one side of the trunk lid back to the rear inside corner of the framing. Then, following along the edge of the framing and cutting outward, George cut a line across the vinyl to the outside of the lid. Then, just as before, George cut the vinyl along the outer edge of the lid down to the top of the work table. With the front and back of the trunk ready for gluing, Pat sprayed a layer of contact cement onto the inside pieces of framing, just underneath the inside of the trunk lid. Then, to get the clock moving on getting the sides tacky, Pat sprayed contact cement on the interior and exterior sides of the trunk lid, as well as the two side pieces of vinyl. While we let the sides get tacky, we began securing the back of the trunk lid in place. Carefully applying pressure to the vinyl, we began pressing the vinyl onto the back framing and down into the lid of the trunk. Then, we turned our attention to the front of the trunk lid and did the same. Next, we began work on the sides. Carefully placing our right sheet of vinyl up to the side of our trunk top, we carefully began pressing it into place. Once secured, we laid the remainder of the vinyl over the edge of the trunk top and began trimming the corners. As with our prior corners, George began by cutting a diagonal line at the back of the first corner, from the inside of the corner through to the outside. Then, Pat cut a line from the outside of our piece of vinyl in to meet the outside corner of George's cut. Next, moving to the front corner, George repeated the process as before by cutting a diagonal along the front corner and then cutting out from the corner to the edge of the vinyl. Then, to clean up the right front corner of the trunk top, George used his X-Acto knife to trim down the outside of the diagonal along the curved side of the lid. Moving back to the back of the lid, George cut away the excess vinyl material left on the side of the lid. And then, we tucked the remaining vinyl material over the edge of the side and down into the top of the trunk.
There we go. Now we're cooking with gas.
Then, trimming across the bottom of the trunk lid, along the side, George cut away the excess side material. Turning our attention back to the front corner, George cut along the curved inside edge up the front half of the bottom, and then cleaned up the lower front edge as well. Then, following the lower edge of the front framing, George trimmed off the excess material there as well. Finally, down to our last side, we pressed our final piece of vinyl against the side of our plywood top and smoothed it down. From there, George began making his diagonal cut at the front corner of the lid. Once the diagonal was cut, George cut a line to the outside of the vinyl so that the vinyl would more easily lay down over the front corner. Then, George used his X-Acto knife to trim down the outside edge of the diagonal and down along the curved side of the lid. Back at the left side back corner, George cut his final diagonal, and Al cut in to meet the front side of it. Then George cut away the excess vinyl material left on the side of the lid, and just like with the other side, we tucked the remaining vinyl material over the edge of the side and down into the top of the trunk. Then, trimming across the bottom of the trunk lid along the side, George cut away the excess side material there as well. Next, turning our attention back to the corner, George cut up along the inside edge up the front half of the material. And then, with that cleared away, cleaned up the excess lower material as well. Then, to wrap up the inside, George removed the excess material from the front corner of the lid. With the lid complete, it was finally time to install our green vinyl inserts inside of the box. Using a few globs of liquid nails to hold the vinyl green insert in place, Pat brought it over and laid it down inside the top. With the box complete, we installed the 4 green vinyl walls in the trunk body and the removable vinyl floor in the bottom. And with that, our vinyl work was complete. Join us next time as we wrap up this luggage trunk build series and show you how adding leather corners, straps, and hardware turn this vinyl-covered box into a beautifully finished luggage trunk on the next episode of Epic Restorations.